My fellow Americans.
There are some uncomfortable stories that we're going to get to on today's broadcast. Something big is happening, and we're not being told exactly what it is. Yesterday, there was this bizarre meeting, we understand, where the head of the CIA went to the Capitol building and got together with the Gang of Eight. Now, the Gang of Eight are the top lawmakers, right? They're sort of meant to sort of rise above all of the political fray. When there's some sort of a crisis, when there's some sort of a big issue, they get together.
Yes.
The Gang of Eight does. So they met with the head of the CIA, and they met in a private skiff room in the basement of the Capitol yesterday. It was a really bizarre, this meeting was hastily called. According to Jake Sherman, the reporter, he's an excellent reporter from Punchbowl News. He used to be a writer for Politico. Now he's on his own with Punchbowl. But he broke this story, said Pelosi, Adam Schiff, McCarthy, and Burns, meaning Burns, the head of the CIA, are going to the skiff with the director, Burns, in the basement of the Capitol. Really bizarre. So the skiff room, if you're not familiar, is a sensitive compartmentalized information facility, which is to give them a briefing. They're giving them some kind of a briefing. We don't know what. Why won't they tell us what this is? When pressed about it, they kept quiet. What's really bizarre that as this meeting was actually unfolding yesterday, a fire alarm went off in the building, and there was a brief evacuation of the Capitol. They went back in and continued these secret meetings. So take a look at this. This was the fire alarm going off. As you can see, something was going on here in the basement. They had to be kind of shuttled out. You can see the lights flashing there, the fire alarm going off. And there was two separate meetings. There was a hastily called intelligence committee meeting yesterday, and this hastily called Gang of Eight CIA meeting in the basement of the Capitol.
Interesting that this happens one day in advance of the China-Russia meeting, right? Where the two heads of state from China and Russia are about to meet in person in Kazakhstan.
Right.
Today, actually.
And attacks in Kazakhstan along the border also. So what is happening here? I mean, you can also see, here's some photos from the basement of the Capitol. You can see what's going on here. We're not being told what it is. Andrew Solander says, lots of members of the House Intelligence Committee here. CIA director was here as well. And you can see them gathering in the basement for this private meeting. I have to say, what's the concern here? I mean, there are a couple of concerns floating around this evening as you're watching this show. One of them is concern over a nuclear attack by Russia. Now, let me repeat that. A nuclear attack by Russia, which they have said unequivocally that's not something that's ever on the table for them, but yet that is a concern inside of Washington. We don't know if that's what this meeting was about. We don't know. Current members of the Pentagon and former generals are saying that they're worried about Putin using nuclear weapons now that they've lost 6,000 square miles in Ukraine. The Western media is saying that Putin is getting desperate. So now he may use nuclear weapons. Do you believe that would lead to a nuclear strike?
Well, as Patrick Lancaster pointed out on Monday, this loss of square kilometers only represents less than 2% of the land that they have gained in Ukraine. So is that a case for despair is one question, right? The fact that Russia has said they are not interested in nuclear war, but they have said that they are interested in retaliating where decisions are made if long-range missiles reach into Russia, right? Where are decisions made, where these dudes are right now.
Yeah, and also that's a good point. I mean, the idea that if they are going to continue to use Western weapons, they're going to continue to ramp up long-range attacks using HIMARS weapons, and other heavy weapons provided by the United States and NATO, that they would react and respond with, I think the words were like, with a fury that you've never seen before. Now, does that rise to the level of nuclear strike? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, again, you'd wipe the whole planet off. I mean, everyone would be destroyed. So I don't know that that's the response. They have enough other weapons to do that.
If Russia was going to use nukes, I don't think Ukraine would be where they would want to use them. I mean, that is one of those weapons that if you're going to deploy it, if you're not planning on destroying the entire planet, then you better use them as far away from you as you possibly can.
Yes.
Right.
You know
but the concern is that they would use it on American soil.
Right.
Right. Because they have said we will strike where these decisions are made.
I don't know. Call me skeptical, but I think something else is going on. Something else is going on. Is the United States having these secret CIA meetings because they're worried about some kind of retribution from Russia? Could it have something to do with yet another one of Putin's closest allies dying yesterday? I mean, again, I'm throwing these out there. You guys let me know what you think. But yesterday, according to Russia Daily, 39-year-old Ivan Pechorin, The managing director of Putin's Far East and Arctic Development Corporation, so development and resources in the Arctic Circle, fell off the side of a boat while sailing in the waters close to Rusky Island. Here he is. He's dead at 39 years old. As we reported here 2 weeks ago, Vladimir Putin's top oil advisors are all dying. Remember the last one we found dead, thrown from a window?
Of a hospital.
From the 6th floor. He just jumped out of the hospital. Doesn't make any sense. Putin's inner circle, like all of the members of his oil sanctum, are basically dying off or being killed. Putin's main guy for exploration in the Arctic is now mysteriously dead, thrown off a boat, or he fell off a boat. One person dies okay. 2, that's a coincidence. 8 of them? 8 of Putin's inner oil circle of advisors? Who is picking these people off?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? 8 people killed, all related around energy and resources. The main concern right now. I don't know. I mean, what's happening? Why are they meeting in the basement of the Capitol? Ukraine wants longer range weapons so that they can attack inside of Russia. You have this victory over the past few days. The real story about that is that there were almost no troops around. It was empty. Very little Russian forces at all. So there wasn't a rout. There wasn't a destruction of these forces. They weren't running and they were catching up to them and overpowering them. They just weren't there. So meanwhile, Western countries are ready to pour billions more into Ukraine, and they are giddy that NATO forces have helped Ukraine mount this counteroffensive. So do we think that Putin is going to sit back and do nothing? That's the question. Is he just going to sort of sit back on his haunches? The Financial Times is reporting this morning that the United States is preparing to send more potent weapons to Ukraine in the form of jet aircraft. So who's going to fly the jet aircraft?
We've had military analysts saying that all of Ukraine's trained military were the first to go. All they're left with are these civilian volunteers.
But it's hilarious. If you're one of these people who, because I actually had a comment the other day in one of our videos and someone said, you mean to tell me NATO is leading these attacks against Russian forces? I mean, that's verifiable. And they're like, what are you smoking? I'm like, Ukraine's military has been decimated. Who else is leading these attacks and strikes using HIMARS? I've spoke to sources in the military who tell me these HIMARS vehicles specifically need to be targeted using intelligence targeting for GPS locating. You can't just randomly operate a HIMARS without intelligence tracking specific spots where these things are going to strike. We don't just put these things in the field and just hope that Ukrainians know how to use them. No, they're being absolutely run by NATO forces. They have been for years, and they are continuing to be. And so that's who's going to be flying these jets. Remember when President Biden said this would never happen? Listen.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III, okay? Let's get it straight here, guys. That old expression, don't kid a kidder.
So, it's incredibly troubling. This is just continuing, and it's going to continue to ramp up because next Monday, you have an opportunity, kicks off the massive defense weapons conference in Texas. Among the companies on display will be Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. All the big players will be there. Armaments, robotics, munitions, merged to meet the mission, the future force capabilities. If you scroll down, who's going to be the keynote speaker at the conference? Oh, that makes perfect sense. If you're going into Austin, Texas to the Defense Weapons Conference, that will be your keynote speaker. Here's my favorite part of the website, though. This is the conference, is the ethics part of the website.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they have an ethics part of the website. They kill people for a living, and yet they have an ethics page. I don't know what's coming. We'll see what this private meeting was about. There's obviously big concerns about this meeting with Xi Jinping and President Putin, but also what does Putin do in response to these mysterious deaths, to this offensive, to this new round of American and NATO weapons showing up in their country and Germany? They said Germany crossed the red line. Who knows what was being discussed in that CIA meeting? We will continue to follow this story.
This is a NATO war against Russia. Okay, this is what it's gotten down to. And Russia has to react in kind. Okay, NATO is allowing this campaign to continue. And we haven't seen destruction of command and control centers in Ukraine.
Yeah, I think we're going to see an escalation. It's going to be a type of escalation that will be more targeted. It looks like what the United States is doing is working with a dedicated group of Pentagon types, and either out of Pentagon Central or out of Germany,
this limited, so-called limited operation was deemed to fail from the very beginning. I mean, obviously, the goodwill of the Russian president and his adherence to the international law was deemed or perceived in the West as a weakness.
This isn't about the battlefield. This is about geopolitics. This is about Russia repositioning itself in the world with China, with India, with other nations. It's about the destruction of American hegemony, the weakening of the U.S. dollar. That's the bigger picture that Russia's playing into. So I just say, look, Ukraine won a battle.
Yeah, right.
But they're losing the war. They're losing the war.
Russian ex-president Dmitry Medvedev issues apocalyptic warning to West over Ukraine. Western half-wits from stupid think tanks are leading their countries down the road of nuclear Armageddon with their hybrid war against Moscow. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev wrote on his Telegram channel on Tuesday, "The Western nations will not be able to sit in their clean homes, laughing at how they carefully weaken Russia by proxy. Everything will be on fire around them. Their people will harvest their grief in full. The land will be on fire and the concrete will melt," Medvedev wrote, before citing a Bible verse from Revelations 9:18. Yet still the narrow-minded politicians and their stupid think tanks, thoughtfully twirling a glass of wine in their hands, talk about how they can deal with us without entering into a direct war. Dull idiots with a classical education, Medvedev wrote.
The uniter-in-chief, our very spry leader who at the helms of his fingertips has the ability to launch nuclear Armageddon at any point in time that he decides. This, as of course this possibility is looming and becomes more probable, especially with the larger proxy war between the East and the West happening right now in Ukraine, where also very surprisingly, astronomers are documenting a lot of unidentified flying objects in that specific country, which leads people down a very big rabbit hole and has them speculating to what in the world is going on here? Are there aliens and intergalactic species interfering, trying to prevent another nuclear war, as there are some popular theories around this? Or is this the latest and greatest military-industrial complex technology that the world still does not know about and modern-day scientists can't quantify? What's the reason behind these unexplained sightings in Ukraine? Well, who in the world knows?
Scientists observing the sky above Kiev have just released an interesting study, announcing that they've detected squadrons and fleets of mysterious aircrafts, saying that they're travelling at extreme speeds, don't match anything else in the sky, and said that at the moment they're everywhere. The mysterious aircrafts have been tracked using cameras that observe meteors, and as of right now they've been seen travelling at tens of thousands of miles per hour. Their findings read as follows. NASA commissioned a research team to study mysterious flying aircrafts, observations of events that cannot scientifically be identified as known natural phenomena. The main astronomical observatory of Ukraine conducts an independent study of these aircrafts also. For these observations, we used 2 meteor stations installed in Kiev, and another in the south of the Kiev region. Observations were performed with color video cameras in the daytime. We have developed a special observation technique for detecting and evaluating these mysterious flying aircraft's characteristics. According to our data, there are 2 types of objects, which we conventionally call cosmics and phantoms. We see them everywhere. We observe a significant number of objects whose nature is not clear. Flights of single, group and squadrons of the ships were detected, moving at speeds from 3 to 15 degrees per second. Some bright objects exhibit regular brightness variability in the range of 10 to 20 Hz. 2 site observations of these mysterious aircrafts at a base of 120 kilometers, with 2 synchronized cameras allowed the detection of a variable object at an altitude of 1,170 kilometers. It flashes for 1/100th of a second at an average of 20 Hz. End quote.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war.